Big LEZ'S League, an all rugby league experience. Hello, welcome back to Big LEZ'S League, an all rugby league experience. I'm your host, Big Les. If you want to see any more rugby league content just like this, make sure to go ahead and hit the subscribe button. Become a part of the Big LEZ'S League community. I've got a pretty special one today. We sort of waited a little while before talking about Zac Lomax. I thought it'd be good to get a guest on and just really break it down and talk about his past contract negotiations as well, and really dive deep into the whole situation and what might happen over the next couple of months. And who better to do that with than former Dragon Jake Marketo? How are you, brother?
I'm well, my friend. How are you?
Mate, swell. Good to meet you for the first time, somewhat face to face over Zoom. And yeah, really keen to sort of break this down because it's been a really interesting last couple of days just hearing the situation. And, you sort of look back on his previous contract negotiations as well, Lomax, and it doesn't look great on his, I guess, character as well and how the fans are currently perceiving the whole situation. Mate, as a former player who I'm sure has had a bunch of different contract negotiations and been through a similar sort of process before, what's your thoughts on the whole situation just with everything we know at the moment?
Well, mate, to be honest, as I said when we spoke during the week, the business side of NRL is a funny thing, Obviously, some players, and I myself thought that the R360 thing was going to take off. Now, they've put that on hold to 2028, but that's obviously put Zac in a bit of limbo. I think he was always going to get a start back in the NRL. As we spoke before, I talked about Zac's a player that puts bums in seats. He's a current Origin and Australian representative player. So I thought once maybe there was some cap space cleared in a couple teams, there would have been some negotiations to take place. I think in my opinion, he's actually too good of an athlete to play rugby union because, in my opinion, obviously rugby league, through my lens, is the greatest sport on earth. And I think Zac should always be playing rugby league. As you can see through his highlights for the last 2 or 3 seasons, especially that last one at the Dragons, he carved and it put him into the rep arena. So I think him getting back into the NRL, obviously it's looking like the Storm at the moment, I think is only going to benefit the NRL and obviously whichever team he goes to.
Yeah, it does look like the Storm at the moment. Let's just sort of, before we get stuck into Storm and what that might look like, player swaps and whatnot, obviously his previous contract negotiations, he left the Dragons early to try and win a comp with the Parramatta Eels. Obviously wanted to play centre as well. Did get stuck on the wing and even played a little bit of reserve grade under Shane Flanagan. That relationship seemed to have sort of fell through and then obviously requested that release, went to Parramatta. And, with Parra, he was playing centre at the start a little bit here and there, but it was almost like they sort of changed their plan with him. And, you looked at his last season with the Dragons and how well he did on the wing. He played Origin, played for Australia as well. Like, you want to get the best out of Zac. You want to get the best out of all of the players in your roster. And, that was obviously going to be on the wing. So they moved him to the wing. Now, whether that's, I guess, stirred this whole situation and him wanting to leave or whether it's the money and the opportunity with Rugby 360 as well, I'm not too sure, but obviously now he's left Parramatta early, and I think this is a little bit worse, right, because he's agreed to a 4-year deal to try and win a comp with a rugby league side, and he's left in the first year to go and what looks like chase money. So it doesn't really look great for him, I guess, the track record at the moment, doesn't it?
Well, it depends, man. I'm not going to really speak on the personal side as I know Zac as a bloke. I know maybe at some stage later on in his career or after he may talk about certain choices that he's made, but I'll always back him as a rugby league player. The reasons I think for him changing were at times maybe to challenge himself, So like we go back to that last year at the Dragons when it exploded for him and a lot of things fell into place. He actually did, I think he played 3 or 4 games in centre that year and was doing what he was doing on the wing anyway. It was just about him injecting himself and maybe taking a little bit more onus on actually showing his skill set. Like, I don't think he was really jumping over anyone until that season really started. And he thought, you know what, I'm going to have a massive crack here. It's my last year at my club that's brought me into the NRL. And as you could see, that whole season, he was rewarded with rep jerseys. He was in the papers every week, mate. The highlights, there was his 100th game that I was actually at. He sprinted 40 metres and jumped over the fullback to catch the ball to score a try. Like, he's an out-and-out athlete. Why he left the Dragons, I'm not going to talk on that. That may be something for him to discuss in a later stage, as I said before. I thought him going to Parramatta was a great move. I thought that was going to like really set it alight. Obviously, Mitch Moses getting injured at Parramatta early in the season, they were very clunky. They managed to win 1 or 2 games. Obviously, new coach and Jason Rolls, who I've got a massive rap on. I reckon he's going to be absolutely outstanding there. I do see Parramatta, depending on injuries, as it is with every other team, winning a comp at some stage with the core group they have there. I think there may be a little bit of a turnover in the next little bit. But Zach going to Melbourne Storm. Now, he did put himself in a little bit of a pickle, no doubt. I'm not sure if it was to chase money. I would like to think that it was to chase opportunity. Imagine earning that amount of money is a plus, playing in a new sport on the other side of the world, probably going to be the face or one of the faces of the brand new competition. Didn't work like that way. That's how life is sometimes. And now he has an opportunity to possibly come back into a arguably top 3 team in the NRL who are always pushing for contention of winning a premiership, and he's only going to help that team rise to that occasion.
Yeah, for sure. I sort of agree in the sense that the para move was really, really good for Zac Lomax and for the Eels as well. I mean, look at a couple of games throughout the year, that field goal with the broken foot against his former side, the Dragons. A few of his performances throughout the year led to him obviously getting picked in rep footy again as well. So I agree that the move to Parramatta in the first place was a great move. And, obviously it is an opportunity to challenge himself. You're completely right. Obviously going to Rugby 360, obviously going over and playing a different sport. And it's a big risk. I respect Lomax as well for taking the risk in the first place, right? It is a huge risk to go over to a sport that you're probably not 100% sure is going to eventuate anyway. And obviously it's turned out that it is delayed another 2 years. But it's a massive risk for him. And I have always sort of said that I respect him for making that choice and taking that risk. It shows a lot about his character. I think Melbourne's a huge opportunity, though. I think that Melbourne going over there, we don't know where he's going to play yet. And I guess we'll get into that in a second as well. But yeah, I think that would be an awesome move for him to get into that side, whether it's playing in the centres, on the wing, maybe even at fullback. I think that would be awesome for the caliber of players that he's with as well. They've got the money freed up with obviously Ryan Pappenhausen leaving. It makes a lot of sense. And Melbourne have always really stacked their side up well, particularly their spine. But getting a guy like Lomax just makes a lot of sense for me. Mate, we've touched on it. Where do we think that Lomax is going to play? Because Meaney's obviously just signed or is about to sign with the Bears. So that obviously, it just looks like they've sort of freed up a spot for Lomax there. What are your thoughts? Where do you see Lomax sitting in this side?
Mate, to be honest, I looked at it last night. I've got some stuff written down here in regards to Parramatta's backline. So just let me read out a couple of names from Parramatta's backline. We've got the Fox, obviously, Iongi, the Penasini brothers, Russell Semirani. Is that correct, if I pronounce that right?
Yeah, Semirani.
Tago, and the new signing, Kelly. Rightio. So, besides the Fox there's some who's obviously a rep player and he's got himself back in the Aussie team. There's a lot of solid first graders there. I'd like to think they would look, depending on where Melbourne want to play Zach, in my opinion, I thought a player swap. As soon as I seen that they were trying to get Zach back in the NRL and that the Melbourne Storm had reached out, I thought the straight player swap would be Will Warbrick for Zac Lomax to go onto the wing and have a wing pairing of Xavier Coates and Zac Lomax down in Melbourne, and then the Fox and Warbrick on the wing for Parramatta, which I think is two formidable wing spots for both of those players.
Yeah, I like it. I think that makes probably the most sense when you're looking at where Zac Lomax played his best football. It's on the wing. And, you've got some pretty good centres there this year at least, as well in how I think Meaney, who, especially Meaney, if he's parked up on that right side, him and Meaney, I think would be a pretty dangerous combo, especially with Meaney having a bit of halves experience too, can get him in some really good spots.
Yeah.
But, for me, and not saying that this is 100% right, but you look at, obviously, his exit from the Dragons going to Parramatta, signed with Parramatta with the idea, reportedly, that he was going to play centre. I just, when I look at it like that, I sort of don't see him playing anywhere really. other than fullback, which I think we sort of spoke about off air, but I think that centre probably for me makes the most sense. And especially with Meaney now going off to the Perth Bears, I just feel like they've freed up that spot for him, or at least they are, going to, for the future, free up that spot for him there at right centre. I think regardless of where he starts his career at Melbourne, saying he goes there, I think Suafalongo is under an immense amount of pressure because he's obviously the new guy that they've brought in. A little bit of NRL experience, but not too much. And I just have the feeling that, if he starts the first 5 or 6, maybe even 7 games off with some poor form or just doesn't look the full quid, doesn't combine well with Hughes and Munster, I think there's a chance that Lomax ends up at fullback. And, even some games here and there for the Dragons when he slotted there at fullback, he looked very comfortable, very dangerous. Do you think there's a chance that he maybe ends up in the number 1 jersey at some point for Melbourne if he does go there for 2026?
As you can see in the sports world, anything is possible. I would think, though, if I'm looking at it from a now point of view, I think missing almost 3/4 of a preseason without getting those reps in at fullback will be the only thing that really hampers that. He's an out-and-out athlete and first grader. I think Fialago, is that how I pronounce it right?
Yep.
I think he's got a massive, massive in. I think he's been knocking on the door for the last couple of seasons, and he was sort of doing that role where he was playing so well. They actually had to put him on the bench, and they were trying to use him as an impact player and coming on in the last 20 minutes. And I think the games that I did see, he actually scored a try within every single one of those, or almost every single one of those last 20 minutes when he did get that impact. I just think looking at the back line, and I think just to make it easier for Zac if he does go to Melbourne, if you put him straight on that wing spot, he can play himself into a bit of fitness. Obviously, he's going to still want to be doing those 15 to 20 carries out of his own end. He's got a bigger body. I've got no doubt he's been training. Just the professionalism that he has is outstanding. I've got no doubt he's been training, and he will hit the ground running when he gets to Melbourne. I think just to make that transition a lot easier for him and for the Melbourne Storm system, I see him going onto the wing. And don't get me wrong, there is opportunity him for possibly moving into centre at some stage if he's pushing for that and Melbourne want him to play there also. And the fullback position, as you said, those first 10 rounds, all teams, they tend, if you watch, the teams that are sort of trying to find their feet in the best combinations, they do use those first 5 to 10 rounds to try and fit those sort of combinations in. So it'll be interesting to see what Melbourne do. The big thing too is the Eels actually play the Storm round 1 of the NRL season. So, if he does end up there, the hype up for that week will be, Riles versus Bellamy. Then you've got Zac obviously going from Parramatta to Melbourne. So it'll be a massive draw card for round 1 of the NRL season.
Yeah, 100%, 100%. Look, I was listening to, I think it was Chad Townsend yesterday. He put up a little podcast just reacting to the situation and sort of giving his perspective. Apparently there's some chat as well that if he does sign with Melbourne, that he wouldn't be able to play round 1. I think if you're the NRL, you've got to scrap that. He's got to be able to play. As you said, it'll be a huge draw card for everyone to come in and watch round 1. It's probably one of the better games anyway for that round 1. Like to have this whole situation unfold throughout the off-season, Volandis will just be licking his lips, right?
I think so. I think, mate, I understand contracts. I understand Parramatta want to have that edge over Melbourne. Zac can't play this, and that. Listen, for the draw of round 1, for the fans, for the actual game, you think you put that to the side and go, rightio, you chose to do this, that's fine. And use it as motivation going into round 1 to try and get down. I think if it is down in Melbourne, that motivates your team. Not saying that there's any bad blood there, but you in rugby league, it's a sport where you want to prove yourself, obviously, every week, not just on the training paddock, but on the field playing on the weekends. So to go down there and sort of put it against them and go, mate, you might have made the wrong decision for going here and leaving us because we're on the rise. There's all these little factors and mental games that come into rugby league also. I don't think it would be a very smart business decision not to let him play. Rugby league is a sport. It is also a business. You want attention. You want people buying the tickets to come watch, and you want the eyes on the TV. So it's a no-brainer to probably scrap that clause and let the big fella play.
100%. Look, I just want to talk about this from an Eels spot, and then we'll talk about the player swap as well. But it seems like the Eels are sort of holding him holding him back from making the move at the moment. They're obviously denied that initial request from Melbourne to get him over there. If you're the Eels, you've got Simonson, you've got Brian Kelly. They've already sort of got someone in to replace Lomax. Granted, it's not a like-for-like replacement, but you've got Simonson, who is pretty much a like-for-like replacement there. He's going to come in, ton of athleticism, really, really talented footballer. I said to you off air, like, he could have a like-for-like season, Bailey Simonson, to Lomax than what he had at that last year at the Dragons. And obviously, his time at Parramatta as well. They've got similar levels of athleticism and talent. So I think if you're the Eels, like, you've replaced Lomax, you've got depth in the back line now, which you didn't have in previous seasons. I'd be letting Lomax go. I know that obviously you don't want him to play against your side. He's very talented. Going to that Melbourne team, it just makes it even better for Lomax. And I just think that you've got to let Lomax leave. I don't think you can really hold him back, and I think the NRL is going to probably come to that decision anyway. Even if the Eels are wanting to hold him back from making a move. What are your thoughts?
Parramatta have every right to do what they're doing, right? You don't give a player up like that without getting something in return. I don't think they want financials. I'd be wanting a player, and Melbourne have some very good outside backs, as I said before, with Warbrick obviously maybe going there. And I think I read on the way home, and we also talked about, is it Howarth?
Yep.
Him also being a player swap. So here's the thing: you want to be getting a player to let him go off the bat, and I think the NRL will step in. I think there will be conversations with them playing managers, and apparently Zac has also got a lawyer involved. It will come to a head, and it will happen at some stage. Parramatta have leverage here, so this is the thing: they'll get what probably they want out of it, which they should, because it was a big decision at the time what happened. Now, obviously, to get Zac back in the game, they're going to have to do some business, and the contract will be upheld in some way. But I think Parramatta will get a player out of it. That was the name I forgot before as well. Simonson, great player, big body, about 6'3". He will be almost to an extent a like for like for Zac to go into the back line at Parramatta. He was chasing a release, I read, late last year due to some discrepancies or something like that. He has a massive opportunity now. There's a spot there open for him. Now he can really stamp his authority in the back line of the Parramatta. I think he's got another 2 seasons there. He could ask for an extension if he comes out and blitzes it this year and puts himself into some rep contention with that position opening up for him.
Yeah, 100%. We as we said, so much potential there, Simonson. He's a great player, very, very athletic. As you said, pretty much like for like there as well, which, as I said, like for the Eels, I think that you've got to take that. And you've got to let Lomax go, and I think that it'll sort of go to that spot anyway. We sort of led into it as well, but we talk about player swaps. We've mentioned Howarth. Meaney's obviously off the table now. He's going to Perth. Warbrick, We've mentioned. Mate, I want to throw one at you. They've got Tyron Wishart there, who they're obviously trying to keep, because he's obviously playing in the 14 jersey at the moment. There's chat about him going to Perth. If I'm the Melbourne Storm, is there any chance that Munster's name is thrown up here as a bit of a player swap? Because they're obviously going to want to keep Wishart. He's still relatively young. I think he's in his mid to late 20s. Munster's obviously not getting any younger as well, still playing exceptional football, but they've got to make a decision, I guess, with Wishart and if they want to keep him or let him go. Is there a chance that maybe Munster's the guy that moves over to Parramatta?
I don't see that happening. Again, rugby league is a funny, funny sport. The way I view this, right, and I'll give you an example. When Hughes went down in the year and they put Wishart straight into 7 and they left Munster at 6. Now, they're obviously not the same player, but they do play similarly. Now, that is due to the playing off cuff, right? Cameron Munster, obviously, absolute freak. Australian number 6, Queensland number 6, Origin legend. Wishart does have the same abilities in regards to playing directly what's in front of him on that tackle, right? Then, as you've seen, when Pezzett actually went in there, it actually freed Munster up, I thought, and it actually freed the Melbourne Storm up, right? So I think if Wishart were to go and play 6 with Hughes, I just don't see it. I just don't see that happening. Cameron Munster is Cameron Munster, and I don't I don't actually see him wearing another jersey, to be honest. I didn't actually think he was going to go to the Bears anyway. I think he's a Melbourne Storm player through and through. If I'm looking at Parramatta, that doesn't make sense for me for them to sign Wishart when they're actually it's between Zac and Wishart. I'm a big believer in same position for a swap. Hence why I thought Pezzett should have gone straight to 7 instead of Wishart at that time when Hughes went out. So I don't see Wishart going to Parramatta. And if I am Wishart and the Bears are floating around, that gives him an opportunity to actually go somewhere fresh and maybe stamp his authority, I suppose, with the new team, write his own sort of story at a new club. But I just don't see Parramatta wanting Wishart when they're going to let a winger centre, Zac Lomax, obviously, go down to Melbourne from Parramatta.
And I think you mentioned it before, obviously, Pezzett. I think that's probably something that Parramatta are going, well, not Parramatta, but Melbourne are probably going to say as well. Obviously, you know, Parramatta, they won't sort of make this thing happen unless there's a player swap involved. But if I'm the Melbourne Storm, you know, they haven't given Pezzett to Para, but Pezzett's obviously moved from Melbourne to Parramatta already. And he's a big player, and he will be one of the better halves in the competition, I think, over the next couple of years in regards to his kicking game and his ability. So in a sense, I guess, you know, Melbourne have already given something, they haven't given Pezzett to Parramatta, but they've let go of Pezzett to go to Parramatta, who is a high-quality player with plenty of potential already.
Yep.
If I'm Melbourne, I can see that sort of being an argument that they throw up to just get Lomax straight in without having to give too much away. Is that sort of a thing that you can see happening as well? That sort of thought process?
Not in a business sense with the leverage that Parramatta have. And the thing is, right, the Pezzett situation, that bloke's an out and out first grader, right? He was stuck behind 2 internationals at Melbourne, and when he did get his opportunity, he practically delivered every single time. Rightio. So I think the going to Parramatta for a year, then to Brisbane, it just gives him an opportunity to play consistent first grade, which I think he has earned, right? When you're a half and you know you should be playing first grade, the amount of patience and professionalism he's shown to stay at Melbourne and learn his trade there is a credit to him. Now, the opportunity to go to Parramatta before Brisbane, I have no doubt Brisbane would have wanted to take him straight away. But you got Adam Reynolds up there, who's your captain and who's just come off a comp. So that in itself doesn't look like a smart trade, considering Reynolds has another year to go around. So the whole point of why I thought Braith Anasta's management for Pezzett there was, we got to get him in first grade every week. Where's a club we can do that? The opportunity was at Parramatta, obviously, because Brown went to Newcastle. So it's an open slot for him to go there now, continue to learn under Jason Rolls, who he's been around for a long time, and then he's paired up with Mitch Moses. Like, talk about you're either playing with Munster or Hughes every week when you're playing first grade. Now you're going to Mitch Moses, right? And there may be an opportunity where he might have to lead the team around Origin time, or if Moses gets injured. Then all of a sudden, the year after, he's up at the Broncos. Walsh, Ezra Mam, Payne Huss, if he's still there, Carrigan, Stagg. Like, there's all these players around him up in Brisbane, and he's going to only add to that through the trade that he's got through Melbourne and Parramatta next year.
Yeah, 100%. I completely agree. It will be interesting, I guess, to sort of see this situation unfold and where Lomax does end up. Obviously, a few players moving around at the moment. Does a player swap eventually happen? I'm not too sure. I think that's probably the most likely option. It sounds like Howarth is going to be the guy that makes his way to Parramatta. I guess the last question before we wrap up, mate, if it is Howarth to go, where does he fit into that Parramatta Eels team? I can definitely see it being potentially at left centre, but I'm not too sure if that's 100% the plan, because I think even at Melbourne, and this is just me going off gut feel and assessing the situation, the initial plan for Howarth was going to be back row there at Melbourne too. So I'm not too sure if that he was eventually going to make that move anyway at the Melbourne Storm, or if he just come in, killed it at centre, and they've left him there. But if you're Jason Rolls, where does Howarth fit into your Parramatta Eels 17?
Well, Howarth was a Australian schoolboys back rower coming through. So I think they've just sort of put him in the centres to get him in the team, Do you know what I mean?
Mm.
Because of the back rows they actually do have there at the moment. And he's a strong ball carrier and a big body. If he does go to Parramatta, so if you look at it, they've got the Fox on one wing, Penasini's in one centre. They've just bought Kelly to play centre, right? Then they've got Simonson. He's going to have a little bit more of a fight to earn a position, I think, unless he maybe does play in the back row, which I'm not too sure how short they are in the forwards. I think they've got great forward stock. So it's a little bit different, I think, if Warbrick were to go there, who's actually playing international footy or has been the last couple of seasons and been at the Melbourne Storm, obviously. He would slot probably a little bit easier straight onto a wing, and then you've got to fight for those centre positions. So it'll be interesting to see the player swap that actually does happen. Again, my money and the smart choice, from my end, looking at it, would be Will Warbrick. I don't think Will Warbrick would be on the amount of money that Zack Lomax can command either. So they may use his cap a little bit, whatever they've got left over from letting the other players go. Then that might give them an opportunity to maybe to go out and buy another player at that time, Melbourne, to bring into their top 30 also. So it'll be interesting to see how the dominoes fall. But my bet is Will Warbrick player swap to Parramatta, Lomax to Parramatta, round 1, Melbourne Storm versus Parramatta Eels.
That is going to be definitely a spectacle to watch, and the physicality in that game is just going to be unreal. Mate, been a pleasure to have you on and sort of discuss this situation. Guys, let us know in the comment section below what your thoughts are on the whole situation, how everything's unfolded, and where you do see Lomax fitting into this side. Am I dreaming a little bit that he ends up at fullback, or is it really a possibility? Where else does he fit into this side? Centre, wing? Let us know in the comments below. Jake, thanks for hopping on, brother.
No worries, my friend. Enjoyed it. Hopefully get on here again with you at some stage.
Easy.
Cheers, mate.